hard to tell you in a short period of time. I think probably the favorite recollection I have of Anique, and really points out her spirit, was about 10 weeks before she passed away. I was trying to get her transportation back to Paul Newman's hole-in-the-wall gang camp, and we were at the Children's Hospital where she was being treated, and they were getting ready to draw blood, and as was our habit, I was nuzzling her cheek, and I started to cry. And she looked at me and said, "Daddy, please don't cry." And I said, "Why, Anique? You cry? I'm not allowed?" She says, "You'll make me cry." And then she closed her eyes for about 5 or 10 seconds, and again, we were nose to nose, and opened them and looked at me and said, "It's all right, Daddy. I don't mind death."
Coming from a little 11-year-old.
11-year-old girl.
She was brave.
Beyond words.
Oh, beyond words, because you gave her the option as to whether to keep this disease secret or whether to talk about it and go public.
In 1992, her physician gave us what I call the final diagnosis. And I immediately went to her and asked her if she would like to tell her story on television, magazines, newspapers. And I said, "Take your time, you know, tomorrow, next week, next month." Took her all of 5 minutes. She said, "Yes, Dad."
I want to show you a clip of an interview that Anique gave after she decided to go public with her story.
I'm scared about my disease. So, sooner or later, not today, not tomorrow, I'll pass away. It was an accident, but I'm upset. Every time I go to look at the hospital, I'm very upset. It's miserable for my parents and me.
Remarkable little girl, your daughter.
You can say that again.
When was that interview shot, Bruce?
The actual interview was April 13th of '92. She passed away July 1st of that year, on her way home from...
Human era. John Centenaro went in for a simple hernia operation and nearly died from a foul-up during his surgery. John, this story is dramatic. Did your doctor realize that something had seriously gone wrong here?
No, he said it was normal procedure. I went in, like you mentioned, for a simple hernia operation. During the intubation process, I don't know how many people know what intubation means. When the anesthesiologist intubates you, how many people know what intubation means? Raise your hand. 3. All right. I didn't know what intubation meant. Intubation means that they place a tube down your throat, right? I didn't have the option. I could have had a local anesthesia, where you're from waist down, and I would have been slightly sedated. I would have been awake. I didn't have the option. He never gave me the option, a general or a local anesthesia. When he intubated me, he used a size 7.5 tube, and he rammed that tube down my throat twice. That was too large. He took the tube out of my throat, and there was blood at the end of the tube. The nurse saw this.
Was this an inexperienced doctor?
No, ma'am. He's been a doctor for 22 years.
Well, how common is it that procedure goes wrong? Because, I mean, they put people out in general anesthesia all the time.
Well, I don't know how common it is, but it happened to me. Because when I woke up from the hernia repair was nothing.
Right.
That was no big deal. But when I woke up, the first thing I said, I have an excruciating sore throat, like someone had cut my throat. There was a throbbing fire in my throat. And when I went into my room, all I asked for was crushed ice. I could not even swallow crushed ice. That's how throbbing this pain was.
And what are they saying? This is normal, it'll go away?
Right. The doctor told me, the anesthesiologist, he told me, don't worry, the swelling will go down. He even said, and I said, sir, what is, he told me he had a difficult intubation. I said, what's intubation? He says, I forced the tube down your throat.
My guests today have all experienced medical nightmares that have changed their lives forever. Ray and Pat McEachern were watching a television football game when Pat got a severe headache and she collapsed. She was taken to a local teaching hospital where she was given an angiogram. That's a standard diagnostic procedure that went terribly wrong. What happened during that procedure, Ray?
Well, the procedure requires that a wire called a catheter be probed from the groin up into the brain arteries. The procedure is fairly simple and usually does not lead to any complications, except in the hands of people who do not know how to perform the procedure. The person who was doing the procedure was 3 months out of college, and he was allowed to learn how to do this procedure by using a human subject. He got it tangled in the aortic arch, trying to go around the artery that does several twists and turns in the area of the chest. He got it tangled up, and when he tried to straighten it, it sprang forward, it pierced the inner wall of the artery inner brain, causing the artery to collapse and leading to a paralysis.
How soon after this happened did you know, and how did you find out that your doctor, the designated physician in charge, had not performed the procedure? Because you said it was an inexperienced doctor.
Several weeks after the incident, I went to see the board-certified physician who was supposedly performing my wife's angiogram. He had signed a form, a so-called consent form, saying he was going to do her angiogram. But I had been told by another physician that during the angiogram, this problem occurred, called a dissected artery. So I went to him to ask him, well, how could a dissected artery have occurred? And he told me, he even drew me a picture on a piece of paper. Well, this is what was being done. And I said, well, gee, Doc, didn't you know how to manipulate that catheter so that wouldn't happen? He said, oh, well, I was only supervising another physician. That's how I learned. The other physician, in other words, was this trainee doctor who obviously didn't know how to do it. And then I discovered that he was only 3 months out of medical school and never done it before.
It sounds like the doctor was being almost, I don't know, flip or cavalier about, oh, here's what happened, and you know what? Oops, it went wrong. I didn't do it. This guy did it. And you know, in the medical community, we blindly trust, and we don't know our rights. May I ask Dr. Bruce Hensel to stand? Bruce is the medical and science editor at KNBC TV here in Los Angeles. He's also a professor of medicine at UCLA. What is the culpability of the medical community?
Well, I think, Lisa, the culpability is complete. I think the point is that I think what the medical professional mentioned is true. And I think that we have to all realize when we first go into this that doctors are human, nurses are human, and errors are going to be made. But that doesn't mean we have to accept that. I think we need to realize that we are medical consumers and that it's our body. Well, you know, 20 years ago, doctors were put on pedestals and we never questioned them. And faith does play a role in healing. But at this point, I think with all of our options, we have got to take responsibility for our own health. The bottom line is errors occur, but how can we prevent them from occurring? What do we need to know ahead of time to ask the questions beforehand?
Sandra Gilbert and her 2 daughters were told that her husband's prostate surgery had been a success. He was resting in recovery, and so the doctor suggested that they go ahead and go out to dinner, which they did. And Sandra, when you got back from dinner, what happened?
We came back and we were told that the doctor was coming down to see us for some reason that wasn't explained. And in about 20 minutes, the doors of the elevator slid open and the doctor came out. And he came up to me and said, we've had a terrible problem. Dad's had a heart attack. And I said, well, what are you doing? What's going to happen? And we started talking, and he just kept shaking his head very strangely, and then took me into a little private room. And as we walked through the door of the room, I said, are you trying to tell me, doctor, that my husband is dead? And he said, yes. And
did he say why? Because he was the one who'd suggested everything's fine, go ahead and go out.
He had said everything was fine. My husband was a healthy man, except for the condition that he was having surgery for. And my daughters could think straight. I couldn't think straight at that point, but they kept asking the doctor. They said, what happened, doctor? What happened to my father? And he said, I don't know, love, I don't know. His pressure just dropped. His pressure dropped.
Now, is that common after a surgical procedure like
I think it may be, but in the event, we found out later on that his pressure had dropped because of what it was that really killed him. In the meantime, the next day, the hospital told us he died of heart failure. 2 weeks later, we got a death certificate that said he had died from liver failure. And at that point, we were so confused, we called a close friend who was a physician. They didn't watch for it, and they didn't find out about it until he was dead.
My next guest is a former Playboy model. She's got her own cable talk show, and she went in for some minor face and eye lift surgery, and there was a complication, Carol. What happened?
Yes, well, the nurse, while I was out, I was completely out for 5 hours, and I was wondering afterwards why I was out for that long, but they spilled acid on me. She did. During the course of the surgery, which was cosmetic surgery. And I was going to have...
how did these burns get on your back?
Well, that's really a good question because, of course, I was out, and I didn't even know till 2 days afterwards. I wasn't even...
And now that we've spent the hour talking about things that can go wrong, medical nightmares, this poor man is going in for some surgery.
Yeah. I'm going in for back surgery on my lower back to take out a couple of discs that are herniated. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering what I should know before going in to prevent something horrible like these people have experienced.
Gee, where do we want to go with that? Ray or Dr. Hensel?
Well, I think, first of all, have you discussed with the doctor exactly what he's going to do, what the potential complications of the procedure are?
Not yet.
Bet you will now.
Definitely.
This was an unusual show for you to be in attendance of today. Good luck to you. We'll be right back. If you'd like to be our studio guest while you're in the Los Angeles area, just give a call to 213-520-2708 for free tickets.
Infection-causing bacteria can live anywhere.